What's up, everybody? Welcome into this Wednesday edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast here on YouTube. I'm your host, Andy Herman. Of course, you can always follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Before I get right into my main topic today, which is going to be what the Packers didn't do at the NFL trade deadline, I want to bring up right away, we have a very special edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast today. Want to make sure you all go and check it out. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Janelle, Sarah, Maggie, and Perry are all going to be doing one super show today. All the queens of the Pack-A-Day podcast are going to be joining forces to bring you this special breakdown of Packers 49ers, what happened at the trade deadline, everything that you need to know about what's going on with the Packers at this moment. So it is a phenomenal episode. They did a tremendous job on it. So make sure to go check that out if you have not already. Again, you can get it wherever you get your favorite podcasts. So make sure to check them out over on today's long form version of the Pack-A-Day podcast. But I know what everyone wants to talk about, and that's the trade deadline and what the Packers decided not to do at the trade deadline. Did not acquire any players, did not make any trades. They were rumored to be very heavily involved in negotiations with the Houston Texans in regards to Will Fuller. The final report that came out said that the Packers were offering a fourth-round pick and that the Houston Texans were pretty steadfast in wanting a second-round pick. Now, I think it should be pointed out, first of all, that no other teams made this trade either. So it wasn't just Green Bay. There's other teams out there, the Cleveland Browns, probably not competing for a Super Bowl, but competing for a spot in the playoffs for the first time in a very long time. They didn't go out and make that deal. The Ravens could still use another receiver. So there were teams out there that are making a push towards the playoffs that could have used a player like Will Fuller, and no other teams made this deal as well. I also think it's worth noting that, they wanted a second round pick. The Packers wanted wanted to give a fourth round pick. And to me, what's crazy about all of this is the logical middle ground of trading him a third round pick for Will Fuller makes so much sense for both teams. I fully understand the Packers not wanting to give up a second round pick for a rental player who's not going to be able to be brought back next season because of the issues with the salary cap already. Maybe I've heard some people say they think they're going to get a third round pick as a comp pick. I do not see that. I think it's going to be a fourth round pick. But for the Houston Texans, unless you really think that you're going to be able to bring him back, which there are some salary cap issues in Houston as well, you are going to lose him probably for a fourth, maybe a fifth round draft pick in 2022. And if Green Bay was willing to come up and offer a third round pick in 2021, that's immeasurably better. A 2021 third round pick from a team that's going to fall probably somewhere towards the end of the draft versus a compensation pick at the very end, probably of the fourth round, maybe of the fifth round, depending on how much he gets signed for. And remember, he may sign for less because of all the issues with the salary cap. So it's not inconceivable that he could eventually go for a fifth round draft choice in 2022. So a third rounder in 2021 should more than suffice for the Houston Texans. That is a good deal for them at this point. They need assets. They're probably not re-signing Will Fuller. Even for this season, they still have Kenny Stills and Randall Cobb and Brandon Cooks and that receiver group. Not that it matters. They're not making a playoff push, but they have wide receivers. They need assets. A third round pick would have made a ton of sense for them. And for the Packers, again, I get not wanting to give up a second, but a third rounder, hopefully pick number 96, a bottom of the third round, barely top 100 pick sort of guy. I think that you can make that deal with the comp picks that you have coming up next year. You have the ability to move maybe those fourth rounders up and maybe get up into the third round anyway. To me, a third round pick for both sides made so much sense. The fact that one wanted a second, the other wanted a fourth, and they couldn't find that middle ground is to some extent frustrating. Now, I went on the record, if you watched the podcast that I did of whether or not Green Bay should make the trade, I gave some of the pros and cons, which I'll go over a couple of those again in just a minute. But I understand, again, why maybe this deal didn't get done. But I was I gave my opinion that Green Bay should have gone all in being a relative term here. I'm not saying they should have mortgaged the future completely, but trading maybe a second or third round pick and maybe like a fifth round pick for a rotational defensive lineman that could have helped them out. This to me was the year because, as I mentioned in that last podcast that I did breaking down trade options, this is the best team that Green Bay is going to have for the next couple years, in my opinion, or at least it's going to be better now than it's going to be next year. They're going to lose some of those free agents, right? They're going to have to probably make some tough decisions and release some players that are playing pretty well, maybe even an Adrian Amos or a Billy Turner or a Rick Wagner. I don't think Devin Funchess is ever going to see the light of day as a Green Bay Packer. I think they're going to release him flat out next year after sitting out a year. I don't think they're going to have the cap to pay him what his salary would have been this year. I just think they're going to have some very difficult decisions to make, and I think that's going to make the team next year even worse. So would it have been fun to get Will Fuller, and would I have gone in that direction and made some moves? Yes. Do I understand why they didn't want to give up a second-round pick? I absolutely do. And I understand unequivocally the frustration of, the Green Bay Packers are going to be in all of these conversations, and then everything comes and goes, and there's nothing, there's much ado about nothing, right? No trades are made. Of course, there's going to be a level of frustration from a fan standpoint when you see these other teams making deals and you want to be a part of that and you want to see Green Bay maybe make an aggressive effort while Aaron Rodgers is still here to get one more playmaker and see if they can make a run towards the Super Bowl. Who wouldn't want that? And again, I fully get that and I fully understand it and I empathize with it. And for Brian Gutekunst, his job is to be paid to look at the long-term health of this franchise. And Russ Ball right there along with him. And I can get and I can understand why when you look at what's going to happen next season, when the salary cap falls and you've got to release players and you've got to trade players, as I mentioned on that other podcast, taking on Will Fuller's contract now could legitimately be the difference between signing David Bakhtiari and Corey Linsley. It could be the difference between signing Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. It could be the difference between, being able to retain a player like Adrian Amos. That $5 million could legitimately be whether or not Adrian Amos is on the team next year. So these are not easy decisions. And while I would lean towards making a move for a player, I also get that coming around the corner are some very, very difficult decisions. And I know that fans don't want to hear what's happening 2-3 years down the road. They want to make a run at something right now. The overarching theme that I hear over and over from scouts, as well as whispers that I've heard from the GM community, is that more often than not, a wide receiver does not make the difference between a great team and a Super Bowl team. That one wide receiver doesn't make the difference. And I believe that we have seen this franchise and the Packers right now have the weapons that they need on offense. Let's be real here. This is a team that has Aaron Rodgers, arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the league at quarterback, an offensive-minded head coach, one of the best running backs in Aaron Jones, one of the best backup running backs in Jamal Williams, two up-and-coming tight ends in Jay Sternberger, a third-round pick, top 100 pick just a season ago, and Robert Tonyan, who's looked much better and much improved this year, one of the best run-blocking tight ends in Mercedes Lewis, one of the best wide receivers in football in Devontae Adams, an up-and-coming wide receiver in Alan Lazard, arguably the best left tackle, arguably one of the best offensive linemen in football in David Bakhtiari, arguably the best center in football in Corey Linsley, and a slew of other offensive linemen who are playing above average right now or above what they've been kind of throughout their career. This is not an offense that is lacking for talent. It's not an offense that's been lacking for production. Do they need to be more explosive when they get from behind and be able to put up some points? Yes. Is that something I think they can coach through with the talent that they have on the team right now? Yes. Am I disappointed that they didn't go out and help their defense? Yes. I think all of it can be true. And I think there can be varying levels of frustration depending on where your mileage is with this Packers team right now. But I think if you take a look at both sides of it and you see what's coming around the corner and you take a step back from 2020 and look at it from a long-term view, I think you can at least understand. And the people that are calling out and saying, well, Brian Gutekunst doesn't know what the hell he's doing and he's incompetent and things like that. If you want to call out some of the draft picks, if you want to call out some of those things, it's still early. We're only in 3 drafts of Brian Gutekunst, and 2 of those drafts we're not going to know for a couple more years whether they panned out or not. But if you want to call out some of the philosophy, I get it. I fully understand it. But you also have to remember that going into next season, when you do have to release those players and the salary cap is very tight, that those second, third, fourth, fifth round picks that you would have to trade away to get rental players right now, those are going to be vitally important. because you don't have the money to go out and spend. Regardless of what happens, they can't bring in some of these, $3 to $5 million free agents next year. It's going to be re-signing their own guys or just having young guys, come up and fill those roster spots. So those draft picks are going to be unbelievably important because they're cheap, they're valuable, and you have the ability to acquire talent using them. That being said, it is up to Brian Gutekunst to pay that off, because next year you can't draft the guys that are 2 or 3 years down the road, that they're prospects that are going to pay off later. You did that this year with Jordan Love and, Josiah DeGuara to some extent and A.J. Dillon, guys you're drafting for down the road. You did it with Rashawn Gary, right? Next year, you're going to have to plug some holes with those draft picks. You have to take a little bit more of these guys need to be able to play now approach with the unique season that's coming up. So if you didn't want to make the moves to maybe get somebody now to go all in now, well, then those draft picks need to be used next year on players who are ready to come in and contribute. That's what I believe is the story that comes out of this trade deadline. I get not making the move, but you better be ready to make some aggressive moves in the draft and find players that can help your team next year, because otherwise, next year's team is simply going to be worse than the team is right now, and you didn't make the move to go in and maybe get a player or two that maybe they wouldn't, but maybe could put you over the edge in 2020. I think that's all I have to say about that. I don't really have any other takes on this. I think it was a very interesting trade deadline. We didn't see a ton of movement. Desmond King maybe would have been a nice piece in Green Bay. We didn't see, outside of Isaiah Ford moving and, the Chiefs making a trade of a running back over to the Miami Dolphins. We didn't see a ton of trades over the trade deadline. So you can tell that next year's pending cap really played a factor in all this, and teams really wanting to be able to keep their draft picks. But it's going to be an interesting rest of the season to see how this team pans out. I'm very hesitant on this defensive line. I think there's a lot of question marks there, and I'm disappointed again that they weren't able to make some moves to shore up that defensive line. It is going to be the onus on Kingsley Keke and Tyler Lancaster and Dean Lowry and that defensive line, Montravius Adams, to step up and play better, because if this team doesn't start playing well internally, we've seen the flaws, and at some point they're going to rear their ugly head again come playoff time. There's still a lot of hope. Take a step back. This is still a team that has a puncher's chance at any given time to win a Super Bowl because of Aaron Rodgers, this offense, and we saw what this defense can do a season ago. If Clark and Preston and Za'Darius and that defense starts playing like they did a season ago, then we're starting cooking with gas again, and this team can do a lot of damage come playoff time. But it's incumbent upon the players on this team now, because we know what the team is going to be. There's no Snacks Harrison out there. There's no trade deadline. There's no magical player. Antonio Brown's not coming. There's no magical player out there that's going to make this roster better. It is what it is at this point. So buckle in. Let's see what happens. Enjoy the ride. I'm excited for the rest of the season. I think this is a team that's still going to make some noise. We'll see how it goes. That does it for me. Make sure to check out the Pack-A-Day podcast with Maggie and Janelle and Sarah and Perry. But thank you as always for listening, and until next time, go Pack Go.